Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast, where we tackle the toughest challenges facing today's dairy industry. And what I'm about to share might be the most uncomfortable truth you'll hear this year. Your dairy legacy has a staggering 83.5% chance of disappearing by the third generation. While you're obsessing over milk prices and feed costs, the real threat to your operation isn't in the barn, it's at your kitchen table. Today, we're ripping the lid off the family dairy time bomb that's ticking under operations across North America. You'll discover the hidden math, family dynamics, and strategic fixes that separate the 16.5% of farms that survive generational transfers from the overwhelming majority that implode. This isn't just another podcast about succession planning, it's your wake-up call to ensure your life's work doesn't become another statistic. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome to the deep dive, where we grab the bull by the horns and really get down to what matters in the dairy industry.
Glad to be digging in.
And today, well, we're kicking things off with a statistic that should make every family dairy operation sit up and take notice. A huge number. 83.5% of family dairy farms don't make it to the third generation.
Wow. Yeah.
Just let that sink in for a second. Is your farm potentially facing that same, uphill battle?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
It's a direct question, absolutely, but frankly, it's one we can't afford to sugarcoat here.
No, definitely not. It's a sobering truth, really. We all know the daily grind, right? The constant juggling of milk prices, feed costs, the weather.
Oh, yeah. The day-to-day.
But the reality is those numbers, they don't lie. Often, the biggest threat to a farm's long-term survival isn't just market swings.
It's closer to home.
It's what happens within the family. It's the lack of a solid plan for the future. It's like the succession elephant right there in the milking parlor.
The succession elephant. I like that. We're calling this the family dairy time bomb.
Aptly named.
Because it's not some, distant worry for way down the road. It's a present danger if we're not proactive.
Absolutely. It sneaks up on you.
Think about it. The USDA tells us 97% of farms are family-owned. That's almost all of them.
Right, the vast majority.
Yet surveys, time and again, show that only around 20% of farmers feel truly confident in their succession plans.
That's a huge gap.
It's a Grand Canyon-sized gap between, good intentions and actually being prepared.
It really highlights this disconnect, doesn't it? Between wanting to pass the farm on and having a concrete roadmap to actually make it happen. And we've all heard that old saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, or the third generation losing the farm.
Yeah, it's almost folklore.
And it can be easy to just brush it off like, oh, that won't happen to us. But then you look at the actual data, like from the Small Business Administration.
No, it's not pretty.
Not at all. Less than a third of family businesses even make it to the second generation. And only about, 16.5% survive to the third?
16.5. Wow.
So you realize this isn't just some old wives' tale. It's a statistical reality. It's backed by data across different sectors, different cultures, even going back centuries.
And let's be honest, the dairy sector, our sector, has its own unique set of hurdles. It makes the succession puzzle even trickier than, say, a family hardware store.
Oh, definitely. You've got factors that just amplify the challenge.
Like what specifically?
Well, first off, it's a 247 business. There's no clocking out at 5.
Nope. Cows don't take weekends.
Exactly. Then there's the massive investment needed in specialized equipment. Think robotics, feeding systems. It's always evolving, always expensive.
And the regulation, don't get me started.
Right. The regulatory landscape can feel like navigating a maze blindfolded sometimes.
Yeah. So all of that just makes handing over the reins that much harder.
It absolutely amplifies the challenges. And while we talk a lot about sustainability these days.
Usually meaning environmental stuff.
Right. Environmental stewardship, which is crucial, of course. But we need to apply that same critical thinking to the operational sustainability. The basic question, will your farm still exist, still be running 30 years from now?
That's the core question.
You remember that Farm Journal survey? 80% of farmers intend to pass the farm on. Good intentions.
Yeah.
Only about 20% feel confident they'll actually manage it successfully.
Intent versus confidence, big difference.
Huge difference. And then that Iowa State study, half of farmers didn't even have a basic estate plan.
Half. That's shocking.
And nearly 3/4 hadn't identified a clear successor. So the picture's pretty clear. Good intentions just aren't enough. You need concrete action.
Okay, now I know when you start talking farm transitions, one of the first things that pops into a lot of farmers' minds, something we hear about at the Bullvine too, is estate taxes.
Ah, yes, the tax man. It's always a concern.
It's a legitimate concern for sure, but is it the main killer?
Well, look, tax planning is definitely a piece of the succession puzzle. You can't ignore it.
Right.
But it's crucial to understand it's rarely the sole reason or even the primary reason that family farms fail to make it through the generations.
So what are the real culprits then?
Think about the farms you've seen that didn't make it. More often than not, the root causes are things like, well, an inability to adapt and scale the operation to stay competitive.
Keeping up with the times.
Exactly. Or unresolved conflicts simmering within the family. That's a big one.
Family dynamics, yeah.
Or simply the next generation. Maybe they lack the passion, that fire in the belly, or maybe they just haven't developed the necessary management skills to take the farm forward successfully.
Those sound like the silent killers you mentioned.
That's exactly what they are, the silent killers of family farm legacies. Less dramatic than a tax bill, maybe, but often far more destructive.
Okay, so let's really dig into the nitty-gritty here. What are these specific challenges within dairy that make these generational transitions so darn difficult?
Right. Dairy does have some very distinct hurdles. First and foremost, you've got the sheer capital intensity of modern operations.
The money. Always the money.
Always the money. We're not just talking land prices, which are, significant enough. Think about the investment in things like robotic milking systems.
Those aren't cheap.
Not even close. We're talking upwards of $200,000 per unit in many cases.
Per unit. Wow.
Yeah. And a 2024 Compeer financial report really hammered this home. They basically said, with the skyrocketing costs and the trend towards larger scale, the old model.
The kids just buy out the parents.
Exactly. That model, where the next generation simply buys out the retiring folks while keeping the business afloat financially, it's becoming increasingly unrealistic for many. The numbers just don't pencil out anymore.
So it puts the next generation in a really tough spot right from day one, saddled with huge debt before they even make their mark.
Precisely. And then you factor in the lifestyle commitment we talked about. It's unlike almost any other industry.
Not a 9-to-5, that's for sure.
No way. It's round-the-clock dedication. So anyone thinking about taking over isn't just making a business decision. They're choosing a way of life, really. It affects everything.
Everything. Their family, their time.
Their whole existence. Interestingly, some research out of Brazil in 2023 actually found a positive link between bigger farm size and actually doing formal succession planning.
Really? So bigger farms are more likely to plan?
It seems so. It suggests that maybe at a certain scale, with the increased complexity and the bigger financial stakes, the need for planning becomes more obvious. You can't just wing it.
That makes sense. Or maybe smaller operations are just too swamped day to day.
That could be part of it too. The sheer daily demands might leave less time, less mental bandwidth for that long-term strategic thinking.
Yeah, when you're dealing with a sick cow or a broken feeder, next year's transition plan feels pretty far away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And beyond the tangible stuff, the land, the cows, the equipment, and the crazy workload, there's all that knowledge, isn't there?
The dairy wisdom.
That's a good way to put it. That intellectual capital, the deep understanding of herd genetics, repro cycles, nutrition quirks, keeping that milk quality perfect.
Stuff you can't learn overnight.
Not at all. And that invaluable knowledge needs to be transferred just as deliberately as the physical assets. A 2023 study, I think it was in the Journal of Agribusiness and Rural Development Research, identified farm transfer and farm handover as key patterns.
Okay.
And both of those require getting the potential successors involved actively and early. You need that overlap to make sure that vital, often unspoken knowledge isn't lost.
Right. You can't just hand over the keys and say, good luck.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Expecting it all to magically transfer is a recipe for failure.
So it sounds like the deck is kind of inherently stacked against a smooth transition in dairy, unless there's a really conscious, really well thought out effort.
I think that's fair to say. It requires intentionality.
And that brings us to what you've identified as the 3 critical elements for either survival or, failure in this process. Unity, talent and drive, and asset growth.
That's right. Those are the pillars.
Let's start by unpacking this idea of unity. You emphasize it goes way beyond just everyone in the family getting along at Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, absolutely. That romantic notion, that family harmony will just automatically prevail once the next generation is involved. It's a dangerously naive assumption.
Just because you shared a bunk bed doesn't mean you can run a multi-million-dollar business together.
Exactly. The stakes are much higher. Livelihoods, significant assets. It's a different ballgame. Legal experts who specialize in this, like Sandon Law, often talk about the challenge of balancing things.
Balancing what?
Balancing the needs and expectations of the kids who stay on the farm versus the kids who leave. How do you distribute assets fairly and keep the farm financially viable? It's a real tightrope walk.
A very tough balancing act. You've even got a table here outlining what unity is and, maybe more importantly, what it isn't in a family farm business. Let's hit a few of these. Unity isn't about everyone always agreeing.
Correct. True unity, in this context, is about creating an environment where everyone feels safe to speak up, even if they disagree, even if it's uncomfortable.
So disagreement is okay? Healthy, even?
It can be very healthy.
Yeah.
It leads to more robust discussion, better decisions in the end. Suppressing different opinions just for a superficial peace, that's weak unity.
Okay. And it's also not about needing total consensus on every single decision, because that sounds impossible.
It pretty much is impossible, and trying for it leads to paralysis. Nothing gets done.
So what's the alternative?
Intentional unity means that even if someone doesn't fully agree with a decision, once it's made, everyone commits. They get on board, work together to make it succeed. It's about trust and shared commitment to the farm's goals, even with individual reservations.
Right. And this one might hit home for some families. Unity doesn't mean everyone has to be best friends outside of work.
Exactly. Look, positive relationships help, obviously. But the foundation of unity in the business is about clear professional expectations. How do we interact here on the farm during business hours?
Respecting roles and responsibilities?
Yes. Mutual respect, shared commitment to the farm's success, regardless of whether you hang out together on Saturday night.
Okay. And this one feels crucial for multi-gen farms. Unity isn't always about strict equality in pay, ownership, or responsibilities.
This is a big one. Fairness in business isn't always the same as absolute equality.
Oh, so?
Unity here means having clearly defined roles, clear responsibilities, and transparent compensation structures that everyone understands and accepts. It's about setting realistic expectations up front. How does the next generation earn their way in? What's the exit plan for the senior generation? How are jobs divided? All agreed upon proactively.
Not assumed.
Never assumed. You quote Daryl Wade from Farm Life Financial Planning Group, saying that not having these tough conversations inevitably leads to bigger headaches later.
That rings true. Avoidance just makes it worse.
Absolutely. He stresses having regular family business meetings, separate from the day-to-day operational chat.
Dedicated time for the tough stuff.
Yeah. Exactly. A structured space to tackle these succession issues before they blow up. Intentional unity doesn't just happen. It takes effort, communication, maybe even some structured arguments.
Okay, so unity is more about structure and professionalism than just warm, fuzzy feelings.
Pretty much, yeah.
The second critical element, talent and drive in the next generation. And you make a really key point that entrepreneurial fire, the thing that maybe started the farm, it isn't automatically passed down like eye color.
No, it's very natural for it to diminish, actually. The founding generation often starts with less, right? They operate out of necessity, maybe scarcity.
Yeah.
That breeds incredible work ethic, huge sacrifices.
Built it from scratch.
Right. Subsequent generations often grow up with more comfort, more security. So that initial, intense, almost primal drive, it can naturally lessen.
So farms need to actively counter that.
Sustainable family farms recognize this. They put strategies in place.
Yeah.
They know the business can't thrive long term if the owners lack drive, if they aren't bringing high value, if they aren't willing to adapt.
And there seems to be a wider issue, too, with just getting young talent into farming in general. The average age keeps climbing.
There is indeed. The Canadian Bar Association pointed this out. Farming is getting more capital intensive, more reliant on complex tech, advanced management skills.
Needs a different skill set, maybe.
It does. And at the same time, the percentage of farmers under 35 has plummeted. It went from 20% back in 91 down to just 8% in 2021.
8%! That's a tiny pipeline.
It's a very real challenge. Finding and cultivating that next generation of skilled dairy operators is getting harder.
And even when the next generation is involved, working hard every day, it doesn't guarantee they see a clear path forward for themselves, does it?
No, and that can be really disheartening. That 2024 CompTIA report mentioned this too. Often, the kids are deep in the labor, maybe even management, but they lack a clear communicated vision for their future role.
Like ownership or real decision-making power.
Exactly. And that uncertainty, it can really stifle their long-term drives. Why pour your heart and soul into it if you don't see a tangible path forward, a real stake in the future?
Yeah, that makes sense. And you also brought up this idea of the hidden succession challenge technology transfer. It's not just about breeding cows anymore.
Not by a long shot. Modern dairy is so tech-heavy. Automated milking, advanced genetic software, complex data analytics for herd management, financials.
The list goes on.
It really does. The next generation needs to be more than just comfortable with this stuff. They need to be proficient. It's a core competency now, alongside the traditional skills. Failing to transfer that tech aptitude, that's a critical but often overlooked failure point.
The farm of tomorrow needs tech skills.
Absolutely. And you included that example, kind of sad really, of Loveland Dairy Whip in Ohio.
The ice cream shop with dairy roots.
Yeah, closed after 31 years because the next generation just wasn't interested.
A clear consequence of that transfer failing.
It really underscores it. When the passion, the knowledge, the interest, when it isn't successfully passed down, legacies can just end. You can't assume they'll want it. You have to actively nurture that interest and capability.
Okay, so we've got unity, talent, and drive. The third essential piece you talked about is asset growth, what you called the uncomfortable math.
Yeah, uncomfortable because it forces a hard look at the financial realities. Which are that dairy farming takes huge capital. And every time another family member comes back to the farm, wanting to work, wanting ownership eventually, that's another household needing financial support from the business.
Another mouth to feed, essentially, from the farm's profits.
Exactly. So without corresponding strategic growth in the farm's assets, it's profitability. The basic math just doesn't work long term. You can't just maintain the status quo if you're adding more families to the draw. You have to grow the pie.
It seems straightforward, but easy to ignore in the daily rush. You have to ask, right? If 2 kids come back, how much more net profit do we need just to keep everyone at the same standard of living?
Precisely. And while that Brazil research linked bigger scale to more planning,
Which makes sense.
it does, but they also made a crucial point. Scale alone isn't the magic bullet. The communication, the strategic planning that goes with that scale, that's just as critical, maybe more so.
Yeah.
You can have a big, efficient farm, but if the financial structure can't support multiple families, or if there's no plan for future growth, succession is still going to hit major roadblocks.
Okay, so given all these potential traps, what can dairy farmers actually do? How do they defuse this family dairy time bomb? You've got a 5-step action plan. Step 1, assess your current readiness.
This is ground zero. You need some honest self-reflection, maybe even uncomfortable reflection.
Asking the hard questions.
Exactly. Like, do we have a written, up-to-date succession plan? And has everyone involved actually reviewed it and agreed to it?
Okay, what else?
Have we clearly identified potential successors? And more importantly, are their current skills and training genuinely lining up with what the farm will need in the future, not just what it needs now?
Future needs. Got it.
Have we actually sat down and crunched the numbers? Calculated the long-term financial needs for every family member who plans to be involved?
The uncomfortable math again.
Yep. And finally, is our current growth path realistic? Is it actually enough to meet those future financial needs?
And if the answer to any of those is no,
then your operation is likely in that danger zone. A no to even one puts you at significant risk. Experts generally say a comprehensive plan needs, well, things like a 3-year and 5-year business plan.
Okay.
A unanimous shareholder agreement if you're incorporated. Clear lease agreements if land is rented. Updated financials, obviously. And explicit plans for grooming, training, knowledge transfer.
Needs to be on paper, not just in someone's head.
Absolutely. Documented, agreed upon.
Okay, tangible items. Step 2 in your plan, develop financial structures that actually support the transition. What does that look like practically?
This often needs some creative thinking about structure, legal, and financial. The Canadian Bar Association had a good case study.
What was the approach?
Splitting the farm into 2 companies. One holds the main long-term assets, land, big machinery, often kept by the senior generation initially.
Okay, an asset holding company?
Right. Then a second company operates the actual farming business. It leases the assets from the holding company. And this operating company is what the successor generation gradually buys into.
Ah, so they don't have to buy the whole farm outright at the start.
Exactly. It massively eases the financial burden on them. They don't need that huge chunk of capital up front. Plus, it gives the retiring generation a steady income stream via the lease payments.
That's clever. A win-win, potentially.
It can be. The underlying idea is that sustainable farms push each generation to learn the skills needed for the future, not just the past. and the financial structure should support that forward look.
Okay, interesting structure. Step 3 sounds simple, but maybe isn't. Start meaningful family conversations. And start them now.
Deceptively simple, absolutely. That Penn State Extension study, it consistently found communication is the hardest part of farm transitions.
The biggest hurdle.
Often, yes. And they stress that successful transitions, especially in complex operations like dairy, can realistically take 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years. Even when things go well.
Even under the best circumstances, with everyone cooperating. That timeline alone shows why you need to start talking now. Urgently.
Can't wait until retirement is looming.
Definitely not. The Bullvine actually had an article on this back in February 24, Ensuring the Future. It stressed starting early, having open, honest talks about everyone's goals, expectations.
Getting it all out on the table.
Yes. Getting everyone on the same page early minimizes conflict later, makes the whole thing smoother.
Makes sense. Can't solve a problem we won't discuss. Okay, step 4. Intentionally develop your successors. This isn't just sink or swim.
No, not at all. It has to be deliberate. Systematic skill development, mentorship. That Compeer article made another good point here.
What's that?
Lenders are increasingly asking about next-gen involvement, about the transition plan. They see a farm without a clear succession strategy as a higher long-term risk.
So not having a plan, not developing successors, could actually hurt your borrowing ability now.
It potentially could, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's formal ag education, structured on-farm training with more responsibility over time, external mentors. Successors need to actively build the skills, the knowledge, the leadership they'll need.
Building capacity.
Exactly. That Agraris Journal study backed this up too. Early, meaningful participation by successors is critical for long-term sustainability. You're investing in them, not just waiting for them to inherit.
Right, a proactive investment. Okay, 5th and final step. Get expert help to test and refine your plan. Don't go it alone.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Succession planning hits so many complex areas. Legal, financial, tax, and maybe the trickiest, family dynamics.
All intertwined.
Deeply. As Compeer advised, get guidance from pros, ag lawyers, tax advisors who get farm transitions, business consultants, your lenders. They all bring a piece.
Because every farm is different.
Totally unique. Assets, debts, family situation. A one-size-fits-all plan just won't work. Baker Tilly Canada listed all the components: family dynamics, training, financial transition, management transition, legal, taxes.
It takes a team.
It really does. A coordinated team to cover all the angles, make sure the plan is solid, legal, and actually doable. And we included a table, kind of a timeline.
Yeah, I saw that. Immediate, short-term, long-term actions.
Right. Just to show it's a process.
Yes.
A marathon, not a sprint. And you need experienced guides.
Makes perfect sense. You wouldn't do surgery on your herd yourself. Why try to navigate the farm's future alone? Now, we've mostly talked parent to child, but you mentioned alternatives.
Yeah, it's important to remember that's not the only path.
Yeah.
Or always the best one. That Loveland Dairy Whip example.
Where the kids didn't want it.
Right. They ended up selling to an unrelated family who wanted to continue the business. The original owners hoped they'd build their own tradition there.
So a different kind of legacy, but the business continues.
Exactly. And other models are gaining traction too. Worker cooperatives, employee ownership transitions.
When there's no family successor.
Right, or if the family wants a different outcome. It keeps the farm going, keeps the employees employed. An Ontario Ministry of Ag report in 2023 stressed being flexible, considering a range of scenarios.
Finding the right fit for that specific farm and family.
Precisely. Finding a sustainable path forward, whatever it looks like.
Okay. You also included a self-assessment tool. How does that work?
Yeah, just a quick way for listeners to kind of gauge where they stand. High level, but useful.
5 areas.
5 key areas: written planning, financial preparation, communication systems, talent development, and contingency planning.
And you rate yourself 1 to 5.
Right. 1 means lots of work needed. 5 means you're on solid ground. Add up the scores. If you're below 20 total.
Red flag.
Yeah, it suggests significant work is needed to improve your odds of a successful transition. We had a client once talking about the challenges. Their main goal, they said, was just not becoming terminal. They knew they were profitable now, but not structured to survive beyond them without a real plan.
Wow. Not becoming terminal. That's blunt.
But honest. And that self-awareness is often the crucial first step.
Puts the stakes in perspective. So we've hit the challenges, the steps, the alternatives. But what are the real consequences of doing nothing, of inaction?
Well, those grim stats we started with, 2/3 failing by Gen 2, over 80% by Gen 3, that's just part of it.
It's just the business side.
Right. Compeer reminded us, unforeseen stuff happens. Health scares, market crashes. A plan is a crucial safeguard. But beyond the money, beyond the farm may be dissolving.
The human cost.
The emotional, psychological cost can be devastating. Family relationships, already complex on a farm, can be just destroyed.
Yeah.
Bitter legal fights, no communication, the whole legacy built over generations evaporated, gone.
Acrimony and regret instead of legacy.
Exactly. Hopes and dreams just dissolved. It's incredibly sad when it happens.
It is. A heavy thought, but vital. So, as we wrap this deep dive, what's the fundamental question every dairy farm family needs to ask themselves right now?
The core question, the bottom line is this. Are you actively building a lasting legacy? Or are you, maybe inadvertently, creating a future liability for your loved ones?
Legacy or liability?
That's it. Census data shows a massive amount of farmland changing hands in the next couple of decades. Huge transfer.
Risk and opportunity.
Both. Big risk if you're unprepared, huge opportunity if you plan proactively. Penn State Extension reframed it well.
How so?
They said succession planning is really about answering the question, what happens if the owner is suddenly unable to run the farm? Illness, accident. Modern farming is too complex to figure that out after a crisis hits.
Can't wait for the emergency.
No. And you hear from farmers who have successfully passed it on. I often say it's the hardest thing they ever did, but also their proudest achievement and the common thread. None of them left it to chance. They were all intentional. They planned.
So the takeaway is crystal clear. Can't put this off.
Not at all. The clock is absolutely ticking on that family dairy time bomb. The choice to defuse it through planning, through communication, or risk letting it detonate. That choice rests entirely with you and your family.
Okay. And just to quickly recap the absolute core messages from our discussion today.
Right. First, remember that shocking stat, 83.5% don't make it to Gen 3, often due to poor planning, family conflict, lack of financial scaling.
Okay. Second.
True unity isn't about zero conflict. It's about having structures to handle formal agreements, maybe mediation to stay aligned on goals.
Got it. Third.
Developing next-gen talent and drive needs deliberate effort. Skills, experience, real responsibility is not just inherited.
Right.
Sustainable asset growth is essential to support multiple households. This often means creative financial structures, like separating assets from operations.
And finally?
Dairy has unique challenges, 247, high-tech costs. Succession plans need to be tailored to these realities, not generic advice.
And just to boil it down even further, the executive summary?
Basically, dairy faces a huge succession challenge, low success rates. Despite the complexity and cost of modern dairy, few have solid plans. Success hinges on unity, via structure, developing talent, and ensuring financial scalability. Dairy-specific demands amplify these needs. Proactive planning, family meetings, financial restructuring, skill development is vital to avoid farm collapse. With massive land transfer coming, the urgency is immense.
Couldn't say it better. So there you have it. Succession planning isn't some optional luxury for dairy farm families. It's an absolute necessity if you want that legacy to continue.
A must-do.
And with that, we want to leave you with one final thought, a call to action, really. What is one specific thing, however small it seems, that you can commit to doing today about your farm succession plan?
Just one step.
Maybe it's finally scheduling that family meeting you've been putting off. Maybe it's digging out your current will or estate plan just to look at it. Maybe it's doing 15 minutes of online research about different business structures.
Anything to get the ball rolling.
Exactly. Taking that first step, even if it feels overwhelming, is often the most critical move.
Yeah.
We really hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and maybe the push you needed to start diffusing your family dairy time bomb.
Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.
Until next time.
That wraps our deep dive into the family dairy time bomb. Remember, building a lasting dairy legacy isn't about chance, it's about intention. The clock is ticking on your family farm's future, and the choice to defuse that bomb or let it detonate rests entirely with you. If this episode hit close to home, take one action this week. Schedule that uncomfortable family meeting you've been avoiding. Your dairy's future depends on conversations happening at your kitchen table, not just decisions made in the barn. For more industry-challenging insights and practical strategies, visit us at thebullvine.com, where we're constantly adding fresh, provocative content to help your operation thrive. Subscribe to our podcast, follow us on social media, and join the conversation. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Bullvine Podcast, where we're not just passionate about dairy farming, we're obsessed with helping you build a legacy that lasts. Until next time, keep challenging conventional wisdom and building something worth passing on.